Your skin was once the most important text you would ever write. Ancient body art and personal adornment formed a hidden language of power, belief, and radical transformation. From the Iceman's mysterious tattoos to the gleaming death masks of forgotten kings, our ancestors used their bodies as living canvases. This journey will uncover 25 astounding transformations, revealing how people communicated with gods, commanded respect, and prepared for the afterlife using only what they wore upon their skin. You will discover a side of history more personal and profound than any written record, seeing the ancient world in a completely new light by the end. How did a simple bead or a line of coal hold the power to change a person's destiny? That simple bead held a universe of meaning. To truly grasp the power of ancient body art, we must step into a world where every choice of pigment, every metal ornament, every scar or tattoo was a deliberate sentence in a conversation everyone understood. This was a language without words, spoken in the market, the temple, and the tomb. A single line of coal around the eyes was not just about beauty, it was a shield against the harsh sun and malevolent forces. A necklace of animal teeth was far more than jewelry. It was a public record of a hunter's skill and courage, a story worn proudly on the chest. These were the social media profiles of their day, broadcasting identity, status, and belief to the world. When an archaeologist unearths a carved bone hairpin, they are not just cataloging an object, they are recovering a lost status update. They hold a piece of someone's identity, a fragment of a personal story tied to family, faith, or social rank. This foundational understanding turns a collection of artifacts into a chorus of individual voices, and it is with this perspective that we can now begin to meet the people themselves, starting with one of the most ancient and enigmatic figures ever discovered. High in the wind-swept Altai Mountains, the skin of a Pazyryk chieftain tells an extraordinary story. His body, preserved for over 2,000 years in a frozen tomb, is covered in intricate tattoos of mythical stags and leaping griffins. This was not mere decoration. Each animal was a piece of spiritual armor, a permanent emblem of power believed to offer specific protection on the journey into the afterlife. The process of receiving these tattoos was a profound ritual of endurance. Using tools of bone and pigment of soot, the skin was pierced again and again, transforming the living body into a walking tapestry of myth. Every line of the tattoo was a prayer, a contract with the supernatural world etched directly into the flesh. Can you feel the weight of that transformation? It was not about looking fearsome in battle, but about becoming spiritually fortified, carrying the essence of powerful creatures as your own personal guardians. This direct physical link to the divine, worn on the skin, reveals a universal human impulse. The body itself became a sacred text, and its illustrations were a language the gods could understand. That belief in the eye as a spiritual gateway traveled down the Nile and into the heart of every Egyptian home. The daily application of Kohl was a ritual of profound importance, far beyond our modern concept of makeup. Imagine the process not as a simple act of beautification, but as a spiritual fortification. Using a small stick, they would trace those thick, dark lines, not only along the lids but extending outwards in a dramatic sweep. This was a direct invocation of the god Horus, the falcon-headed sky deity whose own distinctive eye markings symbolized protection, royal power, and good health. Each stroke was a silent prayer, a deliberate effort to shield one's own soul from malevolent forces that might enter through the gaze. The very substance they used, a finely ground mineral called galena, was believed to hold protective properties itself. So this was a dual defense, a physical barrier against the harsh desert sun and blinding glare, and a metaphysical shield against the evil eye. This transformation turned every individual, from the pharaoh to the common farmer, into a living emblem of divine protection. Their faces became sacred masks, blurring the line between the human and the heavenly. The striking, otherworldly appearance that we so associate with ancient Egyptian art was not merely a fashion statement. It was a public declaration of faith worn directly on the skin. This was a world where the divine was not locked away in temples but could be drawn on every single morning with your own hand. And if the eyes were a gateway to the soul, then what of the body as a whole? Another culture would answer that question by turning the entire human form into a living, breathing monument. The face itself became a living record, carved not with ink but with memory. Among the Maori of New Zealand, the sacred practice of Moko represents one of history's most profound physical and spiritual metamorphoses. This was not merely a tattoo applied to the skin. It was a carving of the skin, achieved with a small, chisel-like instrument called a nyuhai. Each strike of the tool did not just deposit pigment, it cut a deep, permanent groove, inlaying a person's entire identity into their flesh. The pain of the process was an essential part of the transformation, a testament to the wearer's endurance and their absolute commitment to their community. Every spiral, every curve, and every line on the face was a specific chapter of their wakapopa, their genealogy. It declared their ancestral lineage, their tribal affiliations, their personal achievements, and their hard-earned social standing. Your face was your resume, your family tree, and your declaration of rights all fused into one. You carried your history with you in a form that could never be lost, stolen, or forgotten. This was identity made permanently, publicly visible. It raises a powerful question about our own world of digital profiles and fleeting trends. How would your sense of self change if your most important story was physically carved upon you, for all to see and for all time? This concept of the body as a walking legal document stands in stark contrast to another ancient practice, where identity was not carved in, but brilliantly built up. The desire to carve identity into living skin finds its ultimate contrast in the stillness of a royal tomb. In the deep shaft graves of Mycenaean, a different kind of transformation was taking place, one that used not the body itself, but a shell of gleaming metal to achieve immortality. When archaeologists carefully lifted the hammered gold masks from the faces of long-dead rulers, they were not looking at realistic portraits. They were witnessing a deliberate act of apotheosis. These masks, with their serene, stylized features and heavy-lidded eyes, were not meant to capture a fleeting human likeness. They were divine blueprints. The artisans hammered the gold into an idealized, impassive visage, a face free from the wrinkles of age or the worries of mortal life. This was the face of a god, not a man. In that final ritual, as the cool metal was pressed against the skin of the deceased king, a profound metamorphosis occurred. The mortal ruler was shed, and an immortal deity was born, his power now frozen for eternity in the unyielding, incorruptible brilliance of gold. Can you comprehend the ambition of that act? It was an attempt to use personal adornment to stop death itself, to build a bridge to the afterlife not with stone, but with a single, perfect object. The mask was a spiritual cocoon, ensuring one's authority would endure, unchallenged beyond the grave. This metallic immortality, however, was a privilege reserved for the few, for those who could command the earth's most precious resources. Yet the universal human fear of death and the hope for an afterlife demanded a response for everyone, not just kings. This leads us to a much older and far more personal form of post-mortem transformation, one that involved not a mask of gold, but a direct and startling intervention on the body itself. While the Mycenaean kings sought immortality through a single mask of gold, an entire civilization embarked on a far more ambitious project to preserve the entire body. In the tombs of Han Dynasty China, nobles underwent a final, staggering transformation. They were encased in suits meticulously assembled from thousands of small, polished jade plaques, each one carefully threaded together with strands of gold, silver, or silk. This was not a mere burial shroud. It was a technological and spiritual fortress for the soul. The Chinese held a profound belief that jade was not just a beautiful stone, it possessed a vital, magical essence. They thought its cool, dense properties could ward off decay, creating a permanent, incorruptible vessel for the body so the soul would never dissipate. Can you envision the sheer scale of this endeavor? A single suit could require over 2,000 individual plaques, each one cut, polished, and drilled by hand, a process demanding thousands of hours of labor by teams of master artisans. The final act was not one of burial, but of assembly, as the luminous stone skin was carefully wrapped around the noble, piece by piece. This was the ultimate personal adornment, a final, permanent identity crafted not for the world of the living, but for eternity itself. The body was transformed into a sacred relic, a shimmering, stone cocoon designed to launch the soul into an immortal existence. It represents one of the most extreme and costly attempts in human history to use material objects to conquer the finality of death. Yet, for all their power and permanence, these jade suits were sealed away in darkness, meant for an audience of gods and ancestors. This stands in stark contrast to adornments designed for a very public and political stage, where the transformation was meant to be seen, feared, and obeyed by everyone. A Celtic warrior did not simply put on his torque, he fused with it. This rigid neck ring of twisted gold or bronze was far more than an ornament. It was a physical and spiritual engine of transformation. To fasten its heavy, unyielding form around your neck was to undergo a profound change in status, a public declaration that you are now a warrior, a chieftain, or a person touched by the divine. The weight of the metal was a constant reminder of your duty, its unbroken circle a symbol of eternal strength and allegiance. It was believed that the torque could channel the raw power of the gods directly into the wearer, offering supernatural protection in the chaos of battle and marking the body as a vessel for forces greater than itself. This was an identity you could not take off at the end of the day. These objects were so integral to the self that they were rarely, if ever, removed, creating a permanent state of elevated being. Unlike the jade suit hidden in a tomb or the death mask placed only at the end of life, the torque was a declaration for the world of the living. Its gleaming presence announced your transformed status to friend and foe alike, a brilliant metallic proof of your courage and your connection to the other world. This concept of a permanent, wearable identity finds a startling parallel on the other side of the globe, where another civilization was mastering a far more delicate, yet equally permanent, art of bodily transformation. A sparkling smile of jade and obsidian could speak directly to the gods in ancient Mesoamerica. The Maya perfected a radical form of dental art, deliberately drilling precise cavities into the enamel of their front teeth only to fill them with brilliant inlays of jade, pyrite, or obsidian. This was a voluntary, painful metamorphosis of one's very smile. The procedure itself was an ordeal, a test of spirit and endurance performed without any modern pain relief. A skilled artisan would use a hard, drill-like tool, often a reed or a fine stone, sometimes with a powdered abrasive, to slowly and methodically grind into the living tooth. The goal was not to cause decay, but to create a perfect setting for a precious stone, Can you fathom the sound, the vibration, the sheer willpower required to sit through that? Once the hollow was prepared, the gleaming inlay was cemented into place, often with a natural adhesive made from plant resins. The result was a mouth that caught the light with every word, a dazzling, permanent display that went far beyond vanity. A jade inlaid smile was a direct reference to the young, resplendent maize god, the source of all life and sustenance. By mimicking his divine visage, a person was transforming themselves into a living symbol of fertility, vitality, and sacred breath. Your smile became a ritual object, a public declaration of your piety and your elevated place in a society where the line between the human and the divine was drawn in jade and fire. This intimate modification proves that no part of the self was considered too personal to be used as a canvas for belief. Yet, if teeth could be set with jewels, then hair could be woven with strands of pure celestial power. A coiled serpent becomes a conduit to the divine. In the sun-drenched courtyards of Minoan Crete, a priestess prepares for a sacred performance. She is not merely dressing for a ritual, she is assembling the very pieces of a goddess. Her costume is a complex language of power, a deliberate transformation designed for a temporary but total metamorphosis. The famous faience figurines from Knossos offer us a frozen moment in this astonishing process. The bare chest is not a sign of vulnerability, but a declaration of potent, life-giving energy. The sinuous snakes writhing in her hands are not feared creatures. They are ancient symbols of rebirth, wisdom, and the chthonic power of the earth itself. And the elaborate, multi-tiered skirt, with its intricate flounces and patterns, represents the structured, layered world over which the goddess holds dominion. Every element, from the headdress to the jewelry, is a sacred prop. When the final piece is in place, a profound shift occurs. The mortal woman recedes, and the embodiment of the earth goddess emerges. She is no longer a person, she is a vessel. In this ecstatic state, she becomes the mediator, the crucial bridge between the human community and the unpredictable forces of nature. Can you feel the weight of that temporary identity? It was a transformation as real and powerful as any permanent tattoo or golden mask, yet it was one that could be put on and taken off. This ritual costuming reveals a breathtaking idea that the divine was not a distant, untouchable force, but a role that could be consciously assumed, a power that could be worn. It was adornment as a direct line to the gods, a temporary skin of the sacred that turned a human into an oracle. And just as a priestess could don the identity of a goddess, so too could a warrior prepare for battle by adorning himself with the very essence of his most formidable prey. A single eagle feather was a story written in courage. Among the plains peoples, the transformation from warrior to living symbol was achieved through the sacred war bonnet, an honor that could not be bought, only earned. Each feather represented a specific, verifiable act of bravery in battle, a selfless act for the community, or a profound spiritual vision received in a dream. The process was a slow, lifelong accumulation of respect, a visible resume of a man's commitment to his people. When the time came to assemble these feathers into a full headdress, the transformation was absolute. This was not casual attire. It was a ceremonial garment of immense spiritual weight, worn for moments of supreme importance. The eagle itself was considered the sacred messenger, the creature that flew highest and could carry prayers directly to the Creator. By wearing its feathers, the warrior was temporarily infused with the eagle's own attributes of strength, foresight, and spiritual connection. He became more than a man. He became a walking embodiment of his tribe's collective courage and wisdom, a beacon of identity for all to see. This was a transformation built not on wealth or birthright, but on proven character and sacrifice. making the war bonnet one of the most deeply earned and spiritually significant adornments in human history. Such profound, earned status stands in stark contrast to the rigid, inherited systems of adornment that were taking shape on another continent, where the very color of your clothing could declare your place in the world for life. A simple leather pouch held the entire identity of a Roman child. From the moment of their naming day, every free-born boy wore a bulla, a small locket suspended around his neck. Inside were protective charms, perhaps a carved symbol or a fragment of a rare substance, all carefully chosen to ward off evil spirits and misfortune. This was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a spiritual shield, a visible sign that the wearer was under the protection of his family and the state, a life not yet fully his own. The true power of this adornment, however, was revealed not when it was put on, but when it was taken off. The journey to adulthood culminated in a single public ceremony on the Feast of the Liberalia, typically around the age of 16 or 17. Before his family and community, the young man would carefully remove the bulla for the very first time. He would then dedicate it to the household gods, the lairs at the family shrine. This was not a casual act of undressing. It was a profound, symbolic transformation performed in front of witnesses. The removal of the protective charm was a declaration, a legal and social rite of passage that instantly redefined his place in the world. In that single gesture, he shed the guarded status of a child and accepted the full responsibilities and privileges of a Roman citizen. His body, once marked as protected, was now marked as ready for duty, for marriage, and for the political life of the forum. Can you feel the weight of that moment? A lifetime of safety literally hung around your neck, voluntarily surrendered to claim your own destiny. This was adornment used not to display status, but to stage its very transformation, turning a personal ritual into the foundation of civic life. While the Roman bulla marked a single, celebrated transition, other cultures wove the entire arc of a human life directly into the skin itself, using patterns that grew and changed from birth until death. A single breath could announce a king in ancient Persia. While the world was busy adorning the body with color and metal, the Persian elite mastered a more ethereal art, transforming their very presence through the science of scent. Their personal adornment was not merely visual, it was an invisible, aromatic halo. The most powerful and wealthy individuals would anoint themselves with lavish perfumes, complex concoctions distilled from the rarest ingredients, the golden threads of saffron, the intoxicating petals of damask roses, the sacred resin of myrrh. This was a deliberate, multi-sensory transformation. In a time long before the commonality of daily bathing, these fragrances performed a kind of magic. They did not simply mask the body, they transcended it. A person enveloped in this cloud of saffron and rose was no longer just a physical being, they became a walking garden, a divine emanation. Their scent was a herald, an invisible messenger that filled a room long before they entered it, speaking silently of their wealth, their refinement, and their inner purity. This olfactory aura was a direct and powerful assertion of status. It communicated that the wearer possessed not only the material wealth to acquire such precious substances, but also the cultural sophistication to wield them. The body, through this scented alchemy, was transformed into a pleasant, almost celestial entity, proving that true power could be felt even with your eyes closed. How would your perception of someone shift if their arrival was always preceded by the scent of a sacred, expensive garden? This invisible adornment created an intimate sphere of influence around the individual, a personal atmosphere of power that no jewel could ever replicate. A silver arm ring forged a bond stronger than any oath. In the Viking world, the moment a chieftain fastened this gleaming band around a warrior's arm, a profound social transformation occurred. This was not a simple gift, not just a payment for services rendered. It was a physical contract, a loop of precious metal that literally bound the warrior to his lord. By accepting and wearing the ring, the man underwent a fundamental change in identity. He was no longer just a free individual. He was now a committed member of the chieftain's retinue, his personal success and survival irrevocably linked to the fate of his leader. The ring itself was a walking, talking declaration of this allegiance, a brilliant, undeniable signal to everyone in the hall of where this warrior's loyalties lay. But the true genius of this adornment was its dual nature. That same arm ring was also a portable bank, a store of value worn directly on the body. If the warrior needed to make a purchase to reward his own follower or to secure supplies in a distant port, he did not need to go to a treasury. He would simply take off the ring, hack off a piece of silver corresponding to the price, and hand it over. The very object that symbolized his unbreakable social bond could be physically broken to instantly transform his economic reality. Can you see the powerful efficiency of this system? A single piece of personal adornment could simultaneously secure a man's place in the social hierarchy and serve as the engine of his daily commerce. It wove together identity, loyalty, and raw economic power into one seamless circle of metal. This concept of the body as a walking ledger of social and economic worth stands in stark contrast to a practice where value was not displayed on the arm, but hidden away in the most intimate of spaces. The deep, earthy scent of henna paste fills the air, a herald of profound change. In the ritual of Mendi, a bride's hands and feet become a living manuscript for her new life. This is not a permanent tattoo, but a temporary, breathtaking transformation that speaks to the very nature of joy and transition. The application is a ceremony in itself, a quiet, focused moment before the wedding festivities, where a skilled artist traces intricate patterns of flowers, vines, and sacred symbols across the skin. Each curve and dot is a silent prayer, a wish for spiritual awakening, for beauty, and for the offering of one's whole self to a partner. The deep, reddish-brown stain that develops is more than just a color, it is a barometer of affection. Many believe the richness of the final hue reflects the strength of the love between the bride and groom, a visible omen of a deep and lasting bond. This adornment is her armor and her blessing as she crosses the threshold. It marks her passage, transforming her body into a canvas of hope, invoking protection and good fortune for the journey ahead, especially for fertility and a happy home. Can you feel the weight of that temporary art? It fades over a few weeks, just as the intense initial phase of marriage slowly evolves into the steady rhythm of a shared life. The fading patterns are a gentle reminder that all things change, that the most powerful transformations are often those we carry within, long after the outward signs have vanished. A pitch-black smile was the ultimate sign of elegance in classical Japan. The practice of Ohaguro, the deliberate blackening of teeth, created a stark and beautiful transformation that resonates with a power we can still feel today. This was not a secret ritual, but a public and celebrated metamorphosis. The process itself was an alchemical art. A special solution was prepared by soaking iron filings in vinegar, a chemical reaction that produced a dark, potent liquid. This was then carefully painted onto the teeth, where it would react with the enamel to create a permanent, lacquer-like black finish. The result was a deep, lustrous smile that gleamed in the candlelight, a striking contrast to the white-painted faces favored by the aristocracy. Can you picture that aesthetic? It was a beauty defined by stark contrast and powerful symbolism. This transformation was a public declaration. For a woman, blackened teeth were a definitive signal that she was now a married adult, a person of maturity, stability, and respectability. It marked her passage from one social role to another, making her status instantly readable to everyone she met. In a society with rigid hierarchies, Ohaguro was a physical manifestation of conformity to an ideal, a deliberate reshaping of the self to fit a specific social mold. This challenging aesthetic forces us to confront a profound truth about beauty itself. It is never a universal constant, but a story that each culture writes upon the body, a transformation designed to make the individual perfectly legible within their world. A nomadic chieftain's legacy was forged not in stone, but in the fluid brilliance of gold. Across the vast Eurasian steppes, the Scythians carried their wealth and identity directly on their bodies, a portable kingdom of metal and meaning. In life, these adornments were a testament to their power, but in death, they became the engine of an eternal transformation. When a great leader was laid to rest, they were encased in an astonishing armor of gold. Elaborate pectorals covered the chest, heavy headdresses crowned the skull, and intricate belt plaques, often depicting stylized stags, griffins, and big cats locked in eternal combat, were fastened around the waist. These were not simply treasures buried for safekeeping. This was a deliberate, final act of statecraft. The chaotic, energetic animal scenes were a direct reflection of the Scythian worldview, a universe filled with powerful nature spirits and the raw struggle for dominance. By clothing the chieftain in this metallic menagerie, his people were not just honoring him, they were permanently fusing his spirit with the very essence of that untamable world. Can you see the power of that final outfit? The mortal man was gone, but the figure in the tomb was no longer merely human. He was transformed into an eternal anchor for his tribe, a powerful, golden effigy that continued to project authority and protection from within the earth. The gold itself, obtained through daring trade and brutal conquest, was the ultimate proof of his earthly prowess, now repurposed to secure his spiritual dominion. This was the nomadic answer to the pyramid, a monument you could wear, ensuring a leader's influence would endure long after his people had moved on. This concept of metallic permanence finds a fascinating echo in a much later period, where metal was used not to create an eternal symbol, but to enforce a very temporary and deeply painful ideal of beauty. A clay lip plate holds an entire world of social meaning. For the Mercy and Surmau women of Ethiopia's Omo Valley, the body is a direct canvas for communicating worth and identity. The transformation begins in adolescence, when a girl's lower lip is pierced and gradually stretched, often over many months or years. Small wooden plugs are inserted first, replaced over time with larger and larger discs, until the lip can accommodate a full-sized plate of clay or wood. This is a public and often painful process, a physical ordeal that is inseparable from the social transition it represents. The size of the final plate is not arbitrary. It is a visible measure of a woman's social value, directly linked to the bride wealth, the number of cattle her family can request when she marries. A larger plate signifies a higher status and a greater capacity for strength and endurance, qualities highly prized within the community. Can you comprehend the weight of that daily adornment? It is a constant physical reminder of one's place and purpose, a declaration of identity worn directly on the face. This standard of beauty, defined by communal norms and collective survival, stands in stark opposition to modern, individualistic ideals. It forces us to ask what we truly mean by value and how deeply our own sense of self is shaped by the physical marks we choose or are chosen to bear. A brilliant red shell plucked from the warm Pacific currents held more power for the Inca than any mountain of gold. The Spondylus, or thorny oyster, was not merely a beautiful object. It was a piece of the divine itself, considered the literal sustenance of the gods. To wear an ornament carved from its fiery, spiny surface was to undergo a profound spiritual transformation. You were no longer just a noble or a priest. You became a living conduit, a bridge connecting the high, dry Andes to the life-giving breath of the distant ocean. This connection was everything. In a civilization where water meant survival, the Spondylus was intrinsically linked to rain, fertility, and the generative forces of the universe. Its vibrant red color echoed the blood of life, and its origin in the warm northern waters made it a physical piece of a faraway, sacred geography. Can you grasp the potency of that link? An emperor wearing a Spondylus pectoral was not just displaying wealth, he was demonstrating his direct material connection to the sources of all abundance. He was wrapping himself in the promise of rain for the crops and fertility for the people. This was adornment as a spiritual technology, where the very substance of the object, its origin story written in its color and texture, was the source of its power. The shell transformed the wearer because it was itself a transformation, a piece of the sea made solid, worn to summon the clouds. A simple crown of leaves could elevate a mortal to the level of a hero in ancient Greece. This was the laurel wreath, a circle of humble foliage that possessed the power to enact one of the most democratic transformations in the ancient world. Unlike a golden diadem passed down through royal bloodlines, this crown had to be earned. It was bestowed upon the victor of the Olympic Games, the poet whose words moved the entire city, or the general who secured a decisive victory. In that moment of crowning, a profound shift occurred. The individual was no longer just a citizen. They became a living embodiment of Arit, that ultimate ideal of human excellence and virtue. The wreath did not signify inherited power, but a moment of transcendence, a peak of human potential achieved through sheer effort, skill, and divine favor. Apollo, the god of light, prophecy, and music, was intimately associated with the laurel, and to wear his sacred leaves was to be touched by his genius. Yet the most powerful aspect of this transformation was its very fragility. The wreath was perishable. Within days, the vibrant green leaves would wilt, dry out, and crumble to dust. This was not a flaw in the design, it was the entire point. The honor was not meant to be a permanent possession you could lock away in a vault. It was a fleeting, public recognition of a single, glorious moment of achievement. The transformation was in the act itself, not in a lasting object. It taught a powerful lesson that true glory lies not in an enduring symbol, but in the memory of the deed, a memory that would outlive any physical crown. How would our own celebrations of success change if the highest honors were as temporary as a leaf, yet as eternal as a story told for generations? This ephemeral crown of merit stands in brilliant opposition to the next transformation we will witness, where status was not earned in a moment, but was literally forged into the skin for a lifetime. The skin itself became a living map of ancestral memory. For many Aboriginal Australian groups, the profound transformation of ritual scarification, known as cicatrization, was not an act of disfigurement, but one of deep inscription. The process was a sacred and arduous rite of passage. Using a sharp flake of stone or a shell, a series of precise cuts would be made into the skin of the chest, shoulders, or back. Into these open wounds, a mixture of ash or fine clay would be carefully rubbed. This deliberate irritation forced the skin to heal by forming thick, raised keloid scars, creating a permanent, textured pattern across the body. Can you feel the significance of that enduring pain? It was a physical echo of the ancestral struggles that formed the world itself. The patterns of these scars were never random. They were a direct and deliberate reflection of the sacred landscape or country. The raised lines might trace the path of a creator ancestor, chart the course of a river system, or map the distinctive markings of a totemic animal. In this way, the individual's very flesh was transformed into a walking, breathing cartography of their spiritual and geographical home. Your body became a text of cultural law, a permanent record of your identity and your unbreakable relationship to the cosmos. This was a transformation that anchored a person not just to a community, but to the very soil, the sky, and the dreamtime stories that gave them life. It was identity written in the language of the land, permanently etched upon the skin for all time. This deep, somatic connection to place presents a powerful contrast to the next transformation, where identity was not found in the land, but was deliberately crafted from the rarest substances on earth. A single bead could announce a declaration of war or a proposal of peace. The beaded regalia of Zulu royalty was a sophisticated language, a vibrant lexicon of color and pattern worn directly on the body. This was not mere decoration, it was a political text, a living constitution woven with tiny glass beads. Every hue held a specific meaning. White, for instance, often symbolized purity and spiritual love, while black could represent marriage or mourning. Green spoke of new land or contentment, and red evoked the intense passions of love and anger, or the bloodshed of battle. When these colors were combined into intricate geometric patterns, they formed complete sentences about the wearer's age, their social status, their clan affiliation, and even their personal accomplishments. For the king himself, this language underwent a magnificent amplification. His adornments were designed to transform a man into the living, breathing heart of the entire nation. A single royal outfit comprising elaborate headdresses, chest panels, belts, and armbands could demand months of dedicated labor from teams of skilled artisans. Each piece was a carefully curated display, a symphony of color and design that broadcasted the kingdom's unity, its wealth, and its unassailable authority. Can you envision the presence of such a figure? He did not just wear his power, he was literally cloaked in the collective identity of his people. The regalia transformed his physical body into a walking symbol of the state, a focal point for loyalty, and a dazzling reminder of the social order. This craft-based art form proves that the most complex political identities could be constructed not from cold stone or metal, but from the meticulous, patient work of threading one tiny bead after another, creating a flexible, luminous skin of kingship. Your signature was once a piece of stone you wore around your neck. In the bustling, sun-baked cities of Mesopotamia, a person's identity and authority could be carried in the form of a cylinder seal. This small, intricately carved stone tube was a revolutionary invention, a master key to the ancient world of law and commerce. A person would wear it as a pendant, often drilled through its center and strung on a cord, keeping it always at hand. But this was far more than jewelry. When pressed into a damp clay tablet, the seal would be rolled out, leaving behind a continuous, raised impression of its unique design. This was your official signature, your social security number, and your corporate logo, all fused into one portable object. Can you grasp the power of that simple action? With a quick roll of the wrist, you could authorize a business contract, finalize a marriage agreement, seal the door to a storeroom to prevent theft, or mark a shipment of goods as your own. The seal transformed an ordinary individual into a legally recognized entity, a person whose word was made physically permanent in clay. The designs themselves were miniature works of art depicting gods, mythical heroes, and ritual scenes that connected the wearer to the divine. This was a transformation of personal authority into something tangible, durable, and incredibly difficult to forge. It blended the deeply practical needs of a complex society with the profound human need for a unique, verifiable self. Your identity was not just something you were, it was something you could hold, wear, and use to leave your mark on the world, one impression at a time. The agony began in childhood, a slow and deliberate reshaping of the body into a living symbol of status. Foot binding in imperial China was not a fleeting trend but a brutal, years-long metamorphosis imposed on young girls. The process was methodical and excruciating. A girl's feet, often before the age of 5, were first soaked in hot water and massaged. Then the 4 smallest toes were broken and folded under the sole. The arch itself was forcibly fractured and bent downward, pulling the heel and toes as close together as possible. The shattered foot was then bound tightly with long strips of cloth, creating the desired lotus shape, a grotesque ideal no more than 3 inches long. The bindings were tightened regularly, a constant source of infection, rotting flesh, and unimaginable pain. Can you comprehend a life defined by that unending ache, a pain you were taught to see as beautiful? This transformation was the ultimate social advertisement. A woman with bound feet could barely walk, let alone perform manual labor. Her pronounced swaying gait, necessitated by her deformed feet, was paradoxically seen as the height of elegance and refinement. Her incapacity was the very proof of her family's wealth, a public declaration that they were so prosperous their daughters did not need to work. A successful binding made a girl supremely marriageable, her tiny feet a prized asset in a social marketplace that valued feminine suffering as a form of cultural capital. This was adornment stripped of any spiritual protection or personal empowerment. It was the body itself remade into a prison of status, a permanent, painful reminder that the most extreme transformations are often not chosen but enforced. How far would you go to fit an ideal if your entire future depended on it? This practice forces us to confront the dark side of bodily art, where the canvas is not a willing participant, and the masterpiece is a lifetime of quiet suffering. A carved wooden raven stares down from the towering totem pole, its story echoing in the gleam of a chief's bracelet. For the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, personal adornment was a portable extension of these monumental family trees. A noble did not merely wear a ring carved with a bear or a headdress frontlet inlaid with the piercing eyes of an eagle. They were undertaking a profound act of embodiment. These were clan crests, sacred animal ancestors acquired in the mythic past, and to display them on your body was to become a living representative of that unbroken lineage. This transformation was both an honor and a heavy responsibility. The weight of the carved argillite bracelet on your wrist was a constant reminder that you carried the history, the spiritual power, and the very reputation of your ancestors with you at all times. Your public actions were no longer just your own, they were reflections of the bear's strength or the raven's cunning. Can you feel the gravity of that connection? It was a form of identity that was both deeply personal and entirely collective. A chief adorned in the regalia of his crest was not just a man of wealth, he was a walking pillar of his community, his very presence a declaration of his family's ancient rights, their storied past, and their enduring place in the cosmic order. This was adornment as a sacred duty, turning skin and spirit into a living, breathing testament to those who came before. A newborn in Mesopotamia entered a world thick with invisible threats. From the very first breath, a person's spiritual state was considered vulnerable, a condition that demanded a permanent, wearable defense. This was the domain of the amulet, a small, potent object designed to enact a continuous protective transformation upon its wearer. These were not simple good luck charms. They were believed to be active agents, magical engines that could alter your very destiny by repelling malevolent forces or attracting benevolent ones. The choice of amulet was a precise science of spiritual warfare. A mother might fasten a tiny, fearsome head of the demon Pazuzu around her infant's neck. This seems counterintuitive, to use a demon for protection, but it was a calculated act of magical defense. Pazuzu was the king of the wind demons, and his greatest enemy was Lamashtu, a malevolent spirit who preyed upon mothers and children. By wearing the head of their foe, the child was shielded, transformed into a being under the protection of a powerful, if terrifying, guardian. An adult seeking prosperity or health might instead carry a carved lapis lazuli lamb, a direct appeal to the protective spirit of a kind deity. Can you feel the weight of that daily life? Every moment was a subtle battle, and your personal adornments were your chosen armor. Your body became a curated collection of defensive spells, a walking fortress warding off sickness, bad luck, and spiritual attack. This practice reveals a profound and anxious worldview, one where the physical and spiritual realms were inseparable, and the self was a constant project requiring reinforcement. The ultimate goal of this adornment was not beauty, but a state of perpetual, magically maintained safety, a transformation that turned every individual into a living, breathing bastion against the chaos of the unseen world. This deep-seated need for protection through objects finds a startling parallel in a final, breathtaking transformation, one that sought to preserve not just the soul, but the very memory of a human life for all eternity. A shaved head in ancient Egypt was a canvas awaiting its most important cover. In the relentless desert heat, the decision to remove all natural hair and replace it with an elaborate, constructed wig was a profound act of transformation. This was not a matter of vanity alone, but a brilliant fusion of practicality, social signaling, and deep spiritual belief. On the most basic level, a thick, layered wig offered essential protection, shielding the sensitive scalp from the blistering sun and creating a barrier against ever-present lice and insects. But the true power of this adornment lay in its layers of meaning. Crafted from human hair, sheep's wool, or even date palm fibers, wigs were complex status symbols. The wealthiest elites could afford towering, heavy pieces with thousands of tiny, tightly braided curls, often scented with precious oils and decorated with golden tubes or delicate beads. There were different wigs for different occasions, a formal, heavy style for official duties and a lighter, simpler one for relaxing at home. This was a society that understood the language of hairstyles as clearly as we understand the language of clothing. Yet the most radical transformation occurred in the temples. Priests shaved their entire bodies daily, every single hair, to achieve a state of absolute ritual purity required to serve the gods. Their resulting baldness was a blank slate, a sign that they had stripped away the mundane human state. When they then placed a clean, ceremonial wig upon their heads, they were not covering a flaw. They were completing a sacred uniform. The wig became the final, defining piece of their purified identity, marking the body as a clean vessel, ready for divine contact. Can you see the elegant logic? One object served as a practical sun hat, a fashionable social marker, and the crowning piece of a priestly uniform. This was the ultimate efficiency in personal adornment, where a single, deliberate choice could transform your physical comfort, your social standing, and your spiritual readiness all at once. Each of these 25 transformations reveals a universal human truth. Our ancestors understood the body not as a fixed biological fact, but as the first and most important material they could shape. A simple line of kohl, a carved jade bead, a single eagle feather, these were not decorations. They were active technologies of the self, deliberate tools used to navigate the most perilous journeys of a human life. From the vulnerable passage of birth, marked by a Roman bulla, to the final transformation into an ancestor, secured by a Scythian's golden armor or a Han noble's jade suit, the body was the primary canvas. This was a language spoken in the temple, the battlefield, and the home, a way to communicate with gods, to command respect from rivals, and to find your precise place within a vast and intricate social hierarchy. The permanent scarification of an Aboriginal elder mapping a sacred landscape onto their skin, the temporary henna of a bride carrying prayers for her new life, the divine gold mask that turned a Mycenaean king into an immortal god, all these practices, in their stunning diversity, point to a single, profound desire. We have always sought to transform our mortal coil into something more, something imbued with meaning, charged with power, and permanently connected to a cosmic order far greater than ourselves. The skin was the original text, and we were its authors. From the spiritual armor of Siberian tattoos to the scented aura of Persian nobility, these 25 transformations reveal a profound and universal truth. Our ancestors did not see their bodies as a fixed biological endpoint. They saw them as the primary, malleable canvas for expressing the deepest currents of human existence. They used the language of adornment to become warriors, deities, hopeful brides, and eternal rulers, proving in brilliant detail that identity is not just who you are on the inside. It is what you deliberately wear, what you permanently mark, and what you choose to carry upon your very skin. This was a dialogue with the cosmos, a way to etch your prayers, your lineage, and your social contract into your own flesh and bone. The Roman philosopher Seneca once observed that time discovers truth, and the long, patient work of archaeology has shown us the truth these ancient practices hold. They speak to a timeless human need to forge an identity, to find a place of belonging, and to undergo a transformation that makes our brief, mortal lives part of something enduring and significant. The desire to write our story on our skin, to armor our souls with gold and jade, and to connect with the divine through a line of kohl or a feather, is a thread that connects us across the millennia. If these stories of ancient art and identity have resonated with you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to continue unraveling history's greatest mysteries with us, one astounding transformation at a time.